The year is 1967, and the Sunset Strip pulses with electric energy. Neon signs flicker against the California twilight, casting pink and blue shadows across the crowded sidewalks where long-haired musicians carry guitar cases and dreams of stardom. The air thrums with the distant sound of amplified guitars bleeding from recording studios and nightclubs, while the sweet, acrid smell of marijuana mingles with exhaust fumes from chrome-bumpered Cadillacs cruising the Strip. Inside Sound City Studios, the most prestigious recording facility on the West Coast, session musicians gather in the dimly lit hallway. The walls are lined with gold records and black and white photographs of famous artists, their faces illuminated by the warm glow of vintage Edison bulbs hanging from exposed cables. Macbeth stands among them, a lean figure in worn denim and a black leather jacket, his dark hair falling just past his collar in the fashionable style of the era. His calloused fingers grip a well-traveled Fender Stratocaster, its sunburst finish worn smooth from countless hours of playing. Mac has spent 3 years grinding in these studios, laying down backing tracks for artists whose names light up marquees while his remains buried in small print on album sleeves. His talent is undeniable. His guitar solos have driven hit records to the top of the charts, yet he remains invisible, a ghost in the machine of the music industry. Tonight, however, something feels different. There's electricity in the air that has nothing to do with the amplifiers humming in the recording booths. The studio door opens with a heavy thud, and Duncan King emerges, the legendary owner of Cawdor Records. Duncan is a towering figure in his early 50s, with silver-streaked hair slicked back and a perfectly tailored suit that speaks of old money and established power. His presence commands immediate attention. Conversations halt mid-sentence, and cigarettes pause halfway to lips. Duncan built Cawdor Records from nothing in the 1,950 seconds, and now it stands as one of the most influential labels in rock and roll, with offices stretching from Los Angeles to London, and artists who define the sound of a generation. Gentlemen, Duncan's voice carries the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Tonight, we're cutting something special. The new Donovan album needs magic, and I'm told you're the wizards who can provide it. His eyes sweep across the assembled musicians before settling on Mac. Macbeth, I've been hearing good things about your work on the Mamas and Papas sessions. Clean, innovative, exactly what we need. Mac feels his heart quicken. Direct praise from Duncan King is rarer than a perfect take on the first try. Around him, the other session players, seasoned veterans who've backed everyone from Phil Spector to Brian Wilson, nod with professional respect, but Mac can see the flicker of envy in their eyes. As they file into Studio A, the room reveals itself as a cathedral of sound. The walls are covered in acoustic panels that create geometric patterns of light and shadow. Vintage microphones stand like sentinels on gleaming stands. While a massive mixing board dominates one wall, its hundreds of knobs and faders resembling the control panel of a spacecraft. Through the large glass window, the control room glows with warm amber light, where engineers in thick-rimmed glasses sit behind the console like mission control operators guiding rockets to the moon. The session begins with a hypnotic rhythm, and Mac finds himself transported. His guitar weaves through the arrangement like smoke through colored glass, creating textures that seem to shimmer in the studio's warm light. When the playback fills the room, even the jaded engineers lean forward, their expressions shifting from professional detachment to genuine amazement. Duncan nods slowly, a rare smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "That's the sound," he says quietly, his voice carrying the weight of someone who's discovered gold. "Mac, I want you to think about something bigger. We're opening a new division, psychedelic rock, the sound of the future. I need someone I can trust to help me build it from the ground up." The words hang in the air like incense, sweet and intoxicating. Mac feels the eyes of every musician in the room upon him, their expressions ranging from admiration to barely concealed resentment. This is the moment he's worked toward for years, the chance to step out of the shadows and into the spotlight of creative control. Later that night, Mac and his closest friend Banquo find themselves walking down the neon-lit Sunset Strip, the pavement still warm from the California sun that set hours ago. Banquo, a bassist with shoulder-length blonde hair and wire-rimmed glasses that reflect the passing headlights, has been Mac's musical partner since their days playing coffee houses in the village. Their friendship was forged in dingy rehearsal spaces and late-night recording sessions, built on shared dreams and complementary talents. The strip buzzes with the electric energy of Saturday night. The Whiskey A Go-Go's iconic sign bathes the street in orange light, while the sounds of the Doors' Light My Fire spill out onto the sidewalk through open doors. Groups of young people in colorful, flowing clothing drift between venues. Girls in peasant dresses with flowers in their hair, guys in fringe vests and love beads. All part of the counterculture revolution that's transforming not just music, but society itself. Did you hear what Duncan said back there? Mac's voice carries an edge of excitement he can't quite contain. A whole new division. We could be shaping the future of rock and roll, man. His leather boots click against the concrete as they pass under the flickering marquee of the Troubadour, where up-and-coming folk singers test their material before intimate crowds. Banquo nods thoughtfully, taking a long drag from his cigarette. It's heavy, Mac. But you know how this business works. Promises come and go like hit singles. One day you're on top of the world, the next you're playing wedding gigs in the valley. His words carry the wisdom of someone who's seen musicians rise and fall, like shooting stars in the Hollywood Hills. They duck into the Rainbow Bar and Grill, a legendary watering hole where music industry deals are struck over whiskey and handshakes. The interior is bathed in dim red light, creating an atmosphere that's both intimate and mysterious. The walls are covered with concert posters and album covers, a visual timeline of rock and roll history. In the corner booth, they spot three figures who seem to command attention despite their attempts at anonymity. The Weird Sisters, as they're known in industry circles, are the most influential music journalists on the West Coast. Stella Hecate, the eldest, wears a black turtleneck and dark sunglasses even in the dim bar light, her silver hair catching the glow from the neon beer signs. Her companions, Luna and Raven, are younger but equally formidable, their reputations built on the power to make or break careers with a single review in Rolling Stone or Melody Maker. Macbeth, Stella's voice cuts through the ambient noise as she waves them over. The session king himself. Sit down, we've been expecting you. Her words carry an otherworldly quality, as if she knows secrets that haven't been revealed yet. Mac and Banquo exchange glances before sliding into the circular booth. The table is littered with demo tapes, press photos, and torn pages from music magazines, the detritus of an industry in constant motion. A thick haze of cigarette smoke creates patterns in the colored light streaming from the jukebox, which currently plays Buffalo Springfield's For What It's Worth at low volume. You're about to become very important, Luna says, her voice dreamy and distant, like someone speaking from behind a veil of marijuana smoke. Duncan King sees something in you, something special. The psychedelic division isn't just about music, it's about power, about controlling the sound of a generation. Raven leans forward, her dark eyes intense. But power comes with a price. The current head of A&R, Malcolm Duncan, Duncan's son and heir apparent, he won't step aside easily. He's been groomed for years to take over the label. Her words hang in the air like a prophecy, heavy with implication. Malcolm's got everything handed to him, Stella continues, her voice taking on an almost hypnotic rhythm. But talent can't be inherited, and creativity can't be bought. The real question is, how far are you willing to go to claim what should rightfully be yours? Mac feels his pulse quicken. The conversation has taken on an intensity that makes the air in the booth feel electric. Outside, the strip continues its nightly celebration. But inside this dimly lit corner of the rainbow, something significant is being discussed. Something that could change the trajectory of his life forever. Banquo shifts uncomfortably, his intuition picking up on undercurrents that his logical mind can't quite process. Careful, Mac, he murmurs, his voice barely audible above the ambient noise. These ladies have been around long enough to see a lot of careers burn out. Sometimes the fast track leads straight off a cliff. The conversation at the Rainbow lingers in Mac's mind as he drives his midnight blue Mustang through the winding roads of Laurel Canyon. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating glimpses of rustic homes hidden behind eucalyptus trees, where rock stars and songwriters have created their own bohemian paradise. The car's radio plays the Beatles' Strawberry Fields Forever, the psychedelic soundscape seeming to echo the surreal quality of the evening's events. Mac pulls into the driveway of the small wooden house he shares with his wife, Groovy, christened Gloria Beth, But no one's called her that since 1963. Their home is a testament to the era's aesthetic. Macrame wall hangings, Indian tapestries draped over furniture, and shelves lined with vinyl records and burning incense. Colored lights strung around the living room create a permanent party atmosphere, while a collection of guitars stands in the corner like sleeping sentinels. Groovy emerges from the kitchen wearing a flowing paisley dress that catches the multicolored light. Her long, dark hair cascades over her shoulders in perfect waves, and her eyes hold an intensity that has always both attracted and intimidated Mac. She's not just a musician's wife, she's a force in her own right, a songwriter whose lyrics have found their way onto B-sides and deep album cuts. Always credited but never quite getting the recognition her talent deserves. "How was the session, baby?" she asks, but something in her expression suggests she already knows it was significant. Groovy has an uncanny ability to read the industry's currents, to sense opportunity and danger with equal precision. Mac sets down his guitar case and pulls her close, breathing in the scent of patchouli oil and creativity that always surrounds her. "Duncan King noticed me. Really noticed me. He's talking about putting me in charge of a whole new psychedelic division." The words tumble out, charged with excitement and possibility. Groovy's eyes widen, but there's something calculating in her expression. She moves to the stereo, a high-end system that Mac invested in after his first big session paycheck, and puts on the 13th floor elevator's "You're Gonna Miss Me." The hypnotic guitar and otherworldly vocals fill the room as she begins to pace, her mind clearly working through implications. "That's beautiful, Mac, but Duncan's got a son. Malcolm's been learning the business since he could walk, and everyone knows he's being groomed to inherit the whole label." Her voice carries an edge of frustration that speaks to years of watching talent take a backseat to connections and birthright. "The Weird Sisters mentioned that tonight," Mac admits, settling onto the low-slung couch covered in a Mexican blanket. "They seem to think there might be a way around it." Groovy stops pacing and fixes him with a stare that seems to peer directly into his soul. "Those three know things, Mac. They've been around since the folk days, watching careers rise and fall. If they're saying something, it's worth listening to." She sits beside him, her hand finding his. "Duncan's throwing a party tomorrow night at his Malibu place. All the industry heavy hitters will be there, including Malcolm. It's the perfect opportunity to make your move, to show everyone that you're not just a session player anymore." Through the window, the lights of Los Angeles spread out like a galaxy, each point of light representing dreams and ambitions burning in the darkness. The city has always been a place where reinvention is possible, where someone can shed their old identity and emerge as something entirely new. "What kind of move?" Mac asks, though something deep in his chest already knows the answer, already feels the gravitational pull of ambition that's been building for years. Groovy's smile is beautiful and dangerous, like sunlight on broken glass. "Malcolm's weak, Mac. He's never had to fight for anything, never had to prove himself in a studio at 3 in the morning with nothing but talent and determination. He's about to have an accident with some very pure, very powerful LSD. Nothing fatal, just enough to make him unavailable when Duncan needs to make his big announcement about the new division." The words hang in the air between them, competing with the hypnotic drone of the music. Outside, a police siren wails in the distance, its sound mixing with the ambient noise of the city that never truly sleeps. Mac feels as if he's standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down into an abyss that promises everything he's ever wanted but demands a price he's never had to pay before. The record clicks to an end, leaving them in silence broken only by the soft whisper of the needle cycling in the run-out groove. In that silence, Macbeth makes a choice that will echo through the corridors of power and reverberate across the stages and studios of an empire built on dreams and ambition. The Malibu beach house rises from the clifftop like a modernist dream, its floor-to-ceiling windows reflecting the orange and purple sunset that paints the Pacific Ocean in impressionist strokes. Duncan King's estate is a testament to the power of rock and roll money. Sleek lines and open spaces that blur the boundary between indoor luxury and the raw beauty of the California coastline. The sound of waves crashing against the rocks below mingles with the distant thrum of electric guitars being tuned on the expansive deck that juts out over the ocean like the prow of a ship. By 9 o'clock, the party is in full swing. The who's who of the music industry drift through rooms filled with abstract art and vintage concert posters, their conversations a symphony of deal-making and creative collaboration. Jim Morrison leans against the bar, his leather pants and flowing shirt making him look like a rock and roll prophet, while Grace Slick of Jefferson Airplane holds court near the massive stone fireplace, her white dress practically glowing in the warm light of dozens of candles arranged on rough-hewn wooden tables. Macbeth arrives fashionably late, his arm linked through groupies, as they navigate the flagstone pathway lined with burning tiki torches. He's traded his usual denim for a burgundy velvet jacket that catches the flickering light, while Groovy flows beside him in a silver lame mini dress that seems to capture and reflect every photon in the vicinity. Her small beaded purse holds more than cosmetics tonight. Nestled inside is a small vial of liquid LSD, so pure it's practically invisible, potent enough to send someone on a journey to dimensions they never knew existed. The main living area spreads out before them like a scene from a Hollywood dream. Musicians, producers, and record executives mingle on Persian rugs scattered across polished hardwood floors. A full band plays on a small stage constructed specifically for the evening, their music washing over the crowd like audio waves breaking against a sonic shore. The air is thick with expensive cigarettes, premium marijuana, and the intoxicating scent of success. Duncan King stands near the panoramic windows, resplendent in a white suit that makes him look like a benevolent emperor surveying his domain. Around him, a circle of industry titans hangs on his every word. Phil Spector, with his signature sunglasses and wild hair, Barry Gordy Jr., radiating the confidence of Motown success, and Ahmet Ertegun from Atlantic Records, his Turkish accent adding an exotic note to discussions of market penetration and artistic vision. Mac, Duncan's voice carries over the ambient noise as he spots the newcomers. Come meet some people who are going to help us change the sound of the future. His enthusiasm is infectious, and the circle parts to welcome Mac with the kind of respect usually reserved for established stars rather than session musicians. But it's the figure standing slightly apart from the group that captures Mac's attention. Malcolm Duncan, heir apparent to the Cawdor Records empire. At 25, Malcolm possesses the kind of effortless confidence that comes from never having to prove yourself. His blonde hair is perfectly styled in the fashionable mod cut, and his navy blue suit is clearly bespoke, tailored in London, and flown to Los Angeles specifically for occasions like this. He holds a crystal tumbler of what appears to be top-shelf bourbon, and his smile carries just enough condescension to remind everyone present of his privileged position. So you're the session king everyone's talking about. Malcolm's voice carries the cultivated tones of private school education and inherited wealth. Father's been singing your praises. Says you might have what it takes to help us tap into this whole psychedelic thing. The way he says psychedelic makes it clear he considers the movement a passing fad rather than a cultural revolution. Mac forces a smile, feeling Groovy's presence beside him like a source of electric energy. Just trying to serve the music, man. The sound is evolving, and we need to evolve with it. His words are carefully chosen, humble enough to avoid confrontation but confident enough to establish his credentials. Evolution, Malcolm muses, taking a sip of his bourbon. I suppose that's one way to look at it, though I've always believed that quality is timeless. The fundamentals of good songwriting don't change just because someone discovers a new guitar effect. His dismissive tone reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of the seismic shifts happening in popular culture. The conversation continues, but Mac finds his attention drifting to the logistics of the evening. The bar is staffed by professional mixologists who create elaborate cocktails garnished with exotic fruits and served in glasses that catch the light like liquid jewelry. The buffet table groans under the weight of gourmet delicacies, caviar from Russia, cheeses from France, and delicacies that speak to Duncan's international tastes and unlimited budget. As the night progresses, the party takes on an increasingly surreal quality. The combination of alcohol, marijuana, and the electric energy of creative people gathering in one space creates an atmosphere that feels charged with possibility. Conversations become more animated, laughter more frequent, and the boundaries between professional networking and pure celebration begin to blur. Groovy moves through the crowd like a ghost, her silver dress catching the light as she mingles with wives, girlfriends, and female artists who are slowly but surely carving out their own space in the male-dominated music industry. Mac watches her work the room, noting how she positions herself near the bar where Malcolm has stationed himself, nursing his bourbon and holding court with a group of young A&R executives who treat his every pronouncement as gospel truth. The night deepens, and the party transforms into something more primal and electric. The formal conversations of early evening have dissolved into passionate discussions about art, revolution, and the power of music to change consciousness itself. Someone has dimmed the lights and lit additional candles, creating pools of golden illumination that make faces appear to emerge from and disappear into shadow like figures in a dream sequence. Mac finds himself drawn into an intense conversation with David Crosby, whose distinctive mustache and knowing eyes speak to someone who's witnessed the transformation of folk into rock and understands the deeper currents moving through the culture. They stand on the deck overlooking the Pacific, where the moonlight creates a silver pathway across the water that seems to lead directly to infinity. "The whole scene's changing, man," Crosby says, his voice carrying the weight of prophecy. "It's not just about 3 chords and a hook anymore. The music's becoming a vehicle for consciousness expansion, for exploring inner space. Whoever controls that sound is going to shape how an entire generation thinks about reality itself." His words hang in the salt air like an incantation, heavy with meaning and possibility. Through the glass doors, Mac can see Groovy in animated conversation with Malcolm near the elaborate bar setup. She's positioned herself perfectly, close enough to engage him directly, far enough from other groups to avoid unwanted attention. Her silver dress catches the candlelight as she gestures expressively, and even from a distance, Mac can see that Malcolm is completely captivated by her presence and energy. The bartender, a professional mixologist hired specifically for the evening, moves with practiced precision behind the mahogany bar that Duncan had imported from a London pub. Crystal decanters filled with amber liquids line the back bar, while an array of exotic ingredients, fresh fruits, rare bitters, and specialty syrups, wait to be transformed into the kind of elaborate cocktails that have become fashionable among the Hollywood elite. "Your wife's quite the conversationalist," Malcolm's voice carries across the room as he signals for another drink. His words are beginning to slur slightly, the premium bourbon having done its work over the course of the evening. She really understands the artistic process. "Most of the women here just smile and look pretty." Groovy laughs, a sound like silver bells that draws other conversations to a momentary pause. "Music is about connection, Malcolm. About finding that bridge between what the artist feels and what the audience needs to hear. Sometimes that requires opening doors of perception that have been locked for too long." As she speaks, she moves closer to the bar, her small beaded purse catching the light as she sets it down near the mixing area. The bartender, focused on crafting an elaborate Ramos gin fizz for another guest, doesn't notice as Groovy's hand moves with practiced precision. The small vial from her purse appears and disappears in the space between heartbeats, its contents finding their way into Malcolm's bourbon with the kind of sleight of hand that would make Houdini proud. Mac feels his pulse quicken as he watches the moment unfold. The LSD is pharmaceutical grade, obtained through connections in the Haight-Ashbury scene, where consciousness expansion has become both recreational activity and spiritual practice. The dose is carefully calculated, enough to send Malcolm on an intense journey that will render him incapable of conducting business for at least 12 hours, but not enough to cause permanent harm. To new beginnings, Groovy raises her own glass, a cosmopolitan that sparkles like liquid rubies in the candlelight. Malcolm responds with enthusiasm, their glasses meeting in a crystalline chime that seems to resonate through the room like a bell marking a significant moment in time. The music shifts as the band launches into an extended jam based on "Tomorrow Never Knows," the Beatles' experimental masterpiece that perfectly captures the psychedelic zeitgeist. The hypnotic drone and backwards guitar effects create a sonic landscape that seems to mirror the altered consciousness that's about to engulf Malcolm, though he remains blissfully unaware of the chemical revolution beginning to unfold in his bloodstream. Duncan King approaches their group, his white suit making him appear almost ethereal in the flickering candlelight. "Malcolm, I want you to spend some time with Mac here. He's got ideas about the psychedelic division that could revolutionize how we approach this new market." His voice carries the authority of someone accustomed to orchestrating exactly these kinds of professional connections. "Absolutely, Father," Malcolm responds, But there's something slightly unfocused about his gaze now, a subtle shift that suggests the LSD is beginning its work. Mac and I were just discussing the fascinating intersections between consciousness and creativity. His words come more slowly now, as if he's having to consider each one individually before allowing it to leave his lips. The conversation continues, but Mac notices the gradual changes in Malcolm's demeanor. His pupils begin to dilate, dark pools that reflect the candlelight like obsidian mirrors. His gestures become more fluid and expansive, as if he's suddenly aware of the air around his hands and wants to explore its texture. The bourbon sits forgotten on the bar as Malcolm becomes increasingly fascinated by the play of light and shadow across the room. "The colors," Malcolm murmurs, his voice filled with wonder. "Has anyone else noticed how the colors are? Breathing?" His gaze becomes fixed on a psychedelic poster advertising a recent Grateful Dead concert, its swirling patterns seeming to move and dance before his dilated eyes. Groovy exchanges a subtle glance with Mac. The plan is working perfectly. Around them, the party continues its natural evolution. Other guests, too absorbed in their own conversations and altered states to pay particular attention to Malcolm's gradually shifting behavior. In a crowd where consciousness expansion is not just accepted but encouraged, one person's psychedelic journey blends seamlessly into the overall atmosphere of the evening. Within 30 minutes, Malcolm's condition becomes impossible to ignore. He stands transfixed before a large abstract painting, his hands moving through the air as if he's conducting an orchestra only he can hear. The geometric shapes and bold colors seem to pulse and writhe under his gaze, transforming from static art into a living, breathing entity that speaks directly to his chemically altered consciousness. The painting is singing. He announces to no one in particular, his voice filled with childlike wonder and confusion. "Can't you hear it? It's playing Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, but backwards. And the lyrics are in colors instead of words." His expensive suit is beginning to show signs of perspiration, and his carefully styled hair has become disheveled as he runs his fingers through it repeatedly, marveling at the sensation. Other party guests begin to notice, their conversations taking on hushed tones as they observe Duncan King's heir apparent, clearly experiencing a very public psychedelic journey. Some smile with knowing amusement. Pharmaceutical-grade LSD is not uncommon at these gatherings, and many have experienced similar journeys. Others, particularly the older industry executives, exchange concerned glances that speak to their worry about business implications and professional reputations. Duncan King notices the shift in atmosphere and approaches his son with the measured steps of someone trying to assess a potentially damaging situation. His white suit seems to glow in the candlelight as he moves through the crowd, his expression carefully neutral but his eyes betraying mounting concern. "Malcolm, son, perhaps you'd like to get some fresh air?" Duncan's voice carries the controlled tone of someone trying to manage a crisis without creating additional drama. "The ocean breeze might help you feel more centered." "Centered?" Malcolm laughs, the sound echoing strangely in the acoustics of the room. "Father, I am the center. I can see the connections now, the golden threads that connect every note to every other note in the cosmic symphony. Look!" He gestures wildly at the air around them, his pupils now so dilated that his eyes appear completely black in the flickering light. Mac recognizes this as his moment and steps forward with the confident bearing of someone prepared to take control of a deteriorating situation. His burgundy velvet jacket catches the light as he approaches Duncan, his expression conveying both concern and professional competence. "Duncan, maybe I should help get Malcolm somewhere quiet," Mac offers, his voice pitched perfectly to suggest both friendship and reliability. "I've got experience with people having intense experiences. Sometimes the best thing is just a calm environment and someone to make sure they stay grounded." Groovy materializes beside them as if summoned, her silver dress shimmering as she adds her voice to the suggestion. "There's a guest bedroom upstairs, away from all the stimulation." Mac's right. Sometimes these journeys just need to run their course in a peaceful space. The music continues its hypnotic drone, but the party's energy has shifted. Conversations become more subdued as guests process what they're witnessing. Some drift toward the deck to continue their networking away from the unfolding drama, while others position themselves to observe how one of the industry's most powerful families handles a very public crisis. "I need to make a call," Duncan says quietly, his voice tight with the kind of controlled panic that comes from watching carefully laid plans beginning to unravel. "There are people who need to know that tomorrow's board meeting might need to be postponed." His eyes meet Mac's with an expression that speaks to both gratitude and desperate need for reliable assistance. As Mac and Groovy guide Malcolm toward the stairs, the young heir apparent becomes fixated on the texture of the mahogany banister, running his hands along its surface with the intense fascination of someone discovering wood grain for the first time. His mumblings become increasingly incoherent, a stream of consciousness monologue about music as mathematics and sound as visible energy that confirms the LSD's powerful hold on his perception. "The frequencies," Malcolm whispers as they reach the top of the stairs. "They're creating geometric patterns in the air. Can you see them? Purple triangles for the bass notes, golden spirals for the guitar." His voice trails off as he becomes completely absorbed in visual hallucinations that transform the upstairs hallway into a kaleidoscope of impossible colors and shifting dimensions. The guest bedroom is a sanctuary of calm compared to the party below. Soft lighting from table lamps creates a warm, womb-like atmosphere, while the sound of the ocean through open windows provides a natural soundtrack that seems to soothe Malcolm's agitated nervous system. Mac and Groovy settle him into a comfortable armchair positioned to take advantage of the ocean view, where he immediately becomes mesmerized by the moonlight dancing on the water. Back downstairs, the party continues, but with an undercurrent of tension that wasn't present earlier. Industry insiders huddle in small groups, their conversations focused on the implications of what they've witnessed. Duncan moves through the crowd with forced normalcy, but his frequent glances toward the stairs betray his anxiety about his son's condition and what it means for the immediate future of Cawdor Records. Phil Spector approaches Mac as he returns to the main room, his signature sunglasses reflecting the candlelight as he speaks in low, confidential tones. "That was smoothly handled, man." Duncan's going to remember who stepped up when things got heavy. His words carry the weight of someone who understands that careers are often made or broken in moments exactly like these. The Weird Sisters appear as if materialized from the shadows, their knowing smiles suggesting they've been watching events unfold with the satisfaction of prophecy fulfilled. Stella Hecate raises a glass of wine that catches the light like liquid garnets, her voice carrying that same otherworldly quality that marked their earlier conversation. "And so the wheel turns," she says softly, her words meant only for Mac's ears. "When the sun rises, the landscape of power will look very different than it did this evening." The morning sun streams through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Duncan King's Malibu estate, revealing the aftermath of the previous night's revelry. Empty champagne bottles and overflowing ashtrays dot the landscape of Persian rugs and mid-century furniture, while the lingering scent of expensive marijuana mingles with ocean salt in the cool morning air. The party debris tells the story of a gathering that continued well into the dawn hours, even after the dramatic events surrounding Malcolm's public breakdown. Duncan King stands on the deck overlooking the Pacific, his white suit from the previous evening replaced by a simple navy blue robe that flutters in the offshore breeze. His usually perfectly groomed silver hair shows the effects of a sleepless night spent making damage control phone calls to board members, business partners, and family physicians. In his hand, a mug of strong black coffee steams in the cool morning air, but his attention is focused on the horizon where cargo ships appear as distant specks against the vast expanse of blue-green water. The sound of footsteps on hardwood announces Mac's arrival, his burgundy velvet jacket replaced by faded jeans and a simple white t-shirt that makes him appear younger and more approachable. His dark hair is tousled from the few hours of restless sleep he managed on Duncan's living room couch, having volunteered to stay overnight to help monitor Malcolm's condition and assist with any immediate business needs that might arise. "How is he this morning?" Duncan's voice carries the weight of a father's concern mixed with a businessman's pragmatic worry about operational continuity. His eyes remain fixed on the ocean, as if searching for answers in the endless movement of waves against the rocky coastline below. "Still pretty deep in the experience," Mac reports, settling into one of the teak deck chairs positioned to take advantage of the panoramic view. Groovy's been sitting with him most of the night. He's not having a bad trip, just he's exploring dimensions that most people never see. Could be another 12 hours before he's fully back in consensus reality. The irony of the situation isn't lost on Mac. He's become the reliable lieutenant precisely because he orchestrated the crisis that created the need for one. The guilt sits in his stomach like a cold stone, but it's overshadowed by the electric thrill of opportunity that courses through his veins like pharmaceutical-grade ambition. Duncan turns from the railing, his expression revealing the kind of exhaustion that comes from watching carefully constructed plans crumble in real time. Counterculture Records is in the middle of crucial negotiations for a distribution deal with Capitol that could expand their reach internationally, and Malcolm was supposed to lead the presentation scheduled for later in the week. "I've been thinking," Duncan says, settling into the chair beside Mac with the heavy movements of someone carrying invisible weight. "This psychedelic division we discussed, it's not just about the music anymore. It's about understanding a culture that's changing faster than any of us anticipated." Malcolm. He pauses, searching for words that won't betray a father's disappointment. Malcolm understands business fundamentals, but he doesn't really get the scene. "You do." The words hang in the salt air like an offering, and Mac feels his heart rate accelerate despite his efforts to maintain outward calm. This is the moment he's been maneuvering toward, the golden opportunity that makes the previous night's deception feel almost justified. "I appreciate the confidence, Duncan. This whole movement is about more than just music. It's about consciousness. About opening doors that have been locked since the Victorian era. The artists who really get it, like the Beatles, the Grateful Dead, Jefferson Airplane, they're not just making records, they're creating sonic keys to altered states of awareness." Through the glass doors, they can see Groovy descending the stairs, her silver dress from the previous evening replaced by a flowing Indian print caftan that makes her appear to float rather than walk. Her dark hair cascades over her shoulders as she approaches, and her expression carries the serene confidence of someone who's successfully navigated dangerous waters. "Malcolm's sleeping now," she reports, settling gracefully into a third chair that completes their impromptu conference. The experience seems to have been transformative, rather than traumatic. He keeps talking about seeing the mathematical structures underlying musical harmony. When he comes down fully, he might actually have some interesting insights to share. Duncan nods, but his focus has clearly shifted to more immediate concerns. The business world doesn't pause for personal crises, and Counterculture Records has obligations and opportunities that demand attention regardless of family circumstances. "Mac, I need someone I can trust to handle the psychedelic division development while Malcolm recovers. Full creative and business authority. Your own office, your own budget, your own A&R team. What do you say?" The offer is everything Mac has dreamed of and more. His own division within one of the most powerful record labels on the West Coast, the authority to sign artists and shape the sound of the counterculture, the financial resources to compete with the major labels for the most innovative talent emerging from the underground scene. "I'm honored, Duncan, and I won't let you down." Mac's voice carries just the right combination of humility and confidence. The perfect pitch for someone accepting responsibility they've secretly orchestrated the opportunity to receive. The conversation is interrupted by the arrival of Banquo, who emerges from the guest parking area carrying his bass guitar case and wearing the rumpled clothes of someone who's driven through the night. His blonde hair is disheveled, and his wire-rimmed glasses reflect the morning sunlight as he approaches the deck with the cautious movements of someone entering a situation he doesn't fully understand. "Mac, I got your message. Is everything all right? The way you sounded on the phone." Banquo's voice trails off as he takes in the scene. Duncan in his robe, the party aftermath visible through the windows, and the subtle tension that speaks to significant events having transpired. "Malcolm had a heavy experience last night," Mac explains, his words carefully chosen to convey truth without revealing culpability. "Duncan's asked me to step up and handle some additional responsibilities while he recovers. I wanted you to be part of it. We're going to build something revolutionary." Banquo sets down his bass case and accepts the cup of coffee that Groovy offers from a thermal carafe she's retrieved from the kitchen. His expression reveals the internal conflict of someone whose intuition is sending warning signals while his conscious mind processes what appears to be a legitimate business opportunity. "What kind of responsibilities?" Banquo asks, his musician's ear picking up subtle harmonics in the conversation that suggest complexities beyond the surface melody. 3 weeks later, the Counterculture Records building on Sunset Boulevard buzzes with the electric energy of transformation. The Art Deco structure, built in the golden age of Hollywood, has been renovated to accommodate the psychedelic revolution taking place within its walls. The lobby now features a massive mural painted by local underground artists, swirling galaxies of color that seem to pulse and breathe under the carefully positioned spotlights. The geometric patterns shift and dance as visitors move through the space, creating an optical illusion that perfectly captures the mind-expanding aesthetic of the era. Mac's new corner office on the 7th floor overlooks the legendary Sunset Strip, offering a panoramic view of the music industry's beating heart. The space has been transformed from corporate sterility into a creative sanctuary. Indian tapestries hang from the walls, complementing the massive Persian rug that covers most of the hardwood floor. A collection of vintage guitars stands in one corner, while state-of-the-art recording equipment occupies another, allowing Mac to demo new ideas without leaving his executive suite. Behind the impressive oak desk that once belonged to a Hollywood studio mogul, Mac reviews contracts for 3 new signings that represent the cutting edge of psychedelic rock. The Mystic Sunrise, a San Francisco band whose debut album promises to redefine the relationship between Eastern philosophy and Western rock music. Electric Mandala, a Los Angeles group that incorporates Indian classical instruments into their guitar-driven soundscapes. And most significantly, the Cosmic Prophets, whose lead singer claims to channel lyrics directly from interdimensional entities during their live performances. The transformation in Mac's appearance reflects his elevated status. Gone are the worn denim and leather jackets of his session musician days, replaced by carefully curated outfits that blend counterculture aesthetics with executive authority. Today he wears a navy blue suit, with subtle psychedelic patterns woven into the fabric, paired with a silk shirt that shimmers like oil on water under the office lighting. His dark hair has grown longer, touching his collar in a style that suggests artistic sensibility while maintaining professional respectability. A gentle knock on the door announces the arrival of his new assistant, Rainbow, born Rebecca Martinez, but rechristened during a consciousness-expanding experience at the Monterey Pop Festival. She glides into the office wearing a flowing dress that seems to capture and reflect every color in the spectrum, her long black hair adorned with small bells that create a subtle musical accompaniment to her movements. "The board meeting's in 10 minutes, Mac," she says, her voice carrying the dreamy quality that many young people have adopted as a rejection of their parents' crisp corporate diction. "Duncan wants you to present the quarterly projections for the psychedelic division." Mac nods, gathering the leather portfolio that contains charts and graphs documenting the explosive growth of his new department. In just 3 weeks, the psychedelic division has signed 12 new artists, negotiated licensing deals with 3 independent labels, and generated more pre-orders than any other department in Cawdor Records history. The numbers tell a story of vision and execution that has impressed even the most conservative board members. The boardroom occupies the building's top floor, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a 360-degree view of Los Angeles sprawling toward the horizon in every direction. The long conference table is crafted from a single piece of Brazilian rosewood, surrounded by leather chairs that have witnessed decades of industry-changing decisions. Oil paintings of legendary musicians line the walls: Billie Holiday, Duke Ellington, Elvis Presley, their eyes seeming to watch over the proceedings with the wisdom of artistic immortality. Duncan King sits at the head of the table, his appearance showing the strain of the past 3 weeks. His usually perfect silver hair appears slightly unkempt, and there are dark circles under his eyes that speak to sleepless nights, worrying about his son's condition and the company's future. Malcolm remains in a private facility in Big Sur, ostensibly recovering from what the family has publicly described as exhaustion, though industry insiders whisper about more exotic explanations. The other board members represent the old guard of the music industry, men in conservative suits whose understanding of rock and roll was shaped by Chuck Berry and Little Richard rather than the Grateful Dead and Jefferson Airplane. They listen with polite skepticism as Mac presents his vision for expanding the psychedelic division into film soundtracks, multimedia experiences, and even fashion licensing deals. "The numbers are impressive," admits Harrison Fletcher, Cawdor's chief financial officer, his Boston accent cutting through the California atmosphere like a cold wind from the East Coast establishment. "But this whole psychedelic thing, isn't it just a fad? What happens when kids move on to the next trend?" Mac stands at the presentation easel, his confidence radiating through the room like heat from a well-tuned amplifier. "Gentlemen, What we're witnessing isn't a fad. It's a fundamental shift in consciousness. The generation coming of age right now has been shaped by experiences their parents never had. Vietnam, civil rights, space travel, nuclear weapons. They're looking for music that addresses the complexity of living in an age when everything is changing simultaneously. His presentation includes photographs from recent recording sessions. Artists with flowing hair and colorful clothing creating music in studios filled with exotic instruments and cutting-edge technology. The images capture the intersection of Eastern mysticism and Western innovation that defines the psychedelic movement, suggesting a cultural transformation that extends far beyond musical trends. Moreover, Mac continues, his voice gaining strength as he moves into territory where his passion becomes undeniable. We're not just selling records anymore. We're selling a lifestyle, a philosophy, a way of understanding reality itself. The Beatles proved this with Sgt. Pepper. When you create art that changes how people think, you create customers for life. Duncan nods approvingly, but Mac notices something in his expression that suggests complicated emotions. Pride in Mac's success mingles with what might be regret about Malcolm's absence, creating an undercurrent of tension that makes the boardroom feel electrically charged, despite its conservative atmosphere. As the meeting progresses, Mac finds his attention drifting to thoughts of Banquo, who has been asking increasingly pointed questions about the circumstances surrounding Malcolm's breakdown. During their last conversation in the studio, Banquo's intuitive understanding of Mac's character seemed to be leading him toward uncomfortable conclusions about the timing of events that elevated Mac to his current position. The paranoia that's been growing like a tumor in Mac's mind begins to metastasize as he considers the implications of Banquo's suspicions. His oldest friend possesses the kind of insider knowledge that could destroy everything Mac has worked to achieve, and worse, Banquo's reputation for integrity makes him exactly the kind of person others would believe if he chose to voice his concerns publicly. That evening, Mac retreats to the private studio he's had constructed in the basement of the Coder Records building, a sanctuary where he can think clearly away from the constant demands of his new position. The underground space is a temple to sound technology. Walls lined with acoustic foam create geometric patterns of black and gray, while vintage microphones and state-of-the-art mixing equipment transform the room into a sonic laboratory where the future of music is being engineered one track at a time. The studio's centerpiece is a massive Moog synthesizer, its bank of knobs and switches resembling the control panel of a spacecraft designed to explore inner rather than outer space. The electronic instrument hums with barely contained energy, its oscillators creating ambient drones that seem to mirror the anxiety building in Mac's chest like a discordant symphony of guilt and ambition. Groovy finds him there at midnight, her presence announced by the soft chime of the bells woven into her hair and the whisper of her flowing Indian silk dress against the carpet. She carries 2 cups of herbal tea that steams in the studio's cool air, the scent of chamomile and honey mixing with the electronic ozone generated by the humming equipment. "You're thinking too much again," she observes, settling onto the leather couch positioned to face the mixing board. Her dark eyes reflect the multicolored lights from the equipment, creating an otherworldly effect that makes her appear to be channeling wisdom from dimensions beyond ordinary perception. Mac accepts the tea gratefully, wrapping his fingers around the warm ceramic and using the simple sensation to ground himself in the present moment. Banquo was asking questions today. Specific questions about the night of Duncan's party, about Malcolm's condition, about the timing of my promotion. His voice carries the weight of someone who's realized that success comes with complications he never anticipated. The studio's ambient lighting shifts subtly as the various electronic devices cycle through their operational phases, creating an atmosphere that feels both futuristic and ancient, like a sacred space where technology has evolved to serve spiritual rather than merely commercial purposes. What kind of questions? Groovy's voice maintains its dreamy quality, but Mac can hear the steel beneath the silk, the calculating intelligence that has helped them navigate the treacherous waters of industry politics and personal advancement. He mentioned that Malcolm seemed fine earlier in the evening, that the change came very suddenly after he'd been talking with you at the bar. He's not making direct accusations, but... Mac trails off, running his hand through his hair in a gesture that has become habitual since assuming his new responsibilities. Through the studio's small window that looks out at street level, they can see the late-night traffic on Sunset Boulevard. Muscle cars and custom motorcycles carrying musicians, groupies, and industry insiders between the clubs, recording studios, and private parties that constitute the nighttime ecosystem of rock and roll commerce. Banquo's always been intuitive, groovy muses, her fingers tracing abstract patterns on the couch's leather surface. That's what makes him such a good musician. He can hear the notes that aren't being played, sense the harmonies that exist in the spaces between the obvious melodies. But that same sensitivity that makes him valuable as a creative partner makes him dangerous as a potential witness. The words hang in the air like incense, sweet and toxic simultaneously. Mac feels the familiar electricity of crossing moral boundaries, the same rush he experienced when they planned Malcolm's elimination from the succession equation. The difference now is that Banquo isn't a privileged heir with inherited power. He's Mac's oldest friend, someone who stood by him during the lean years when session work barely paid the rent on their shared apartment in Hollywood. There are people, Groovy continues, her voice taking on the hypnotic rhythm that Mac has learned to recognize as her most persuasive mode, people who handle problems for the industry. Musicians who ask too many questions, journalists who dig too deep into stories that should remain buried, business partners who threaten to expose inconvenient truths. She's referring to the shadow network that exists parallel to the legitimate music business. Connected individuals who ensure that potentially damaging information never reaches the wrong ears. That witnesses to compromising events sometimes decide to relocate to distant cities. That problematic people occasionally have accidents that remove them from the equation entirely. Mac knows about Charlie, the fixer Torino, a smooth operator who maintains offices in both Los Angeles and Las Vegas, providing services that range from discrete problem-solving to permanent solutions for clients who can afford his considerable fees. Charlie moves through the industry's social circles like a well-dressed ghost, appearing at the right parties, knowing the right people, always available when delicate situations require professional attention. It doesn't have to be dramatic, Groovy continues, her voice barely audible above the ambient hum of electronic equipment. A bad batch of heroin, a car accident on Mulholland Drive, a diving incident off the Malibu coast. Things happen in this business, especially to people who can't handle the pressure of success and the temptations that come with it. The tea in Mac's hands has grown cold, but he continues to hold the cup as if it's an anchor connecting him to normal human experience. Outside, a police siren wails in the distance, its sound mixing with the bass lines bleeding from the various clubs and recording studios that line the strip like neurons in the brain of American popular culture. Banquo's been my friend since we were nobody, Mac says quietly, his voice carrying the weight of someone wrestling with choices that will define not just his career but his character. We shared everything, rehearsal spaces, guitar strings, dreams of making it big someday. How do I justify? By remembering that he's threatening everything we've built, Groovy interrupts, her voice gaining intensity as she moves from the couch to kneel beside Mac's chair. You've created something revolutionary here, something that could reshape how an entire generation relates to music and consciousness. Are you going to let one person's suspicions destroy the platform we've built to elevate human awareness through sound? Her hands find his face, forcing him to meet her gaze directly. In her eyes, he sees his own ambition reflected and amplified, transformed from personal desire into cosmic purpose. The studio's colored lights play across her features, creating an effect that makes her appear to be channeling otherworldly wisdom rather than earthly manipulation. Charlie Torino will be at the Rainbow tonight, she continues, her voice now barely above a whisper. He handles these kinds of situations with complete discretion. All it takes is a conversation, an arrangement, a small financial transaction. By next week, Banquo will be just another casualty of the rock and roll lifestyle, and your secret will be safe forever. The decision forms in Mac's mind like a song emerging from silence. Tentative at first, then gaining strength and momentum until it becomes inevitable. He thinks about the empire he's building, the artists he's planning to sign, the cultural revolution he has the power to shepherd. Against that magnificent future, one person's life begins to seem like an acceptable sacrifice, especially when that person poses a direct threat to everything Mac has worked to achieve. The Moog synthesizer releases a long, haunting note that seems to resonate through the studio's acoustic foam and into the very foundations of the building above. In that electronic voice, Mac hears the sound of destiny calling, offering him everything he's ever wanted in exchange for everything he once believed about friendship, loyalty, and the price of success. 2 months after Banquo's body was discovered floating in the Pacific near Malibu Pier, the music industry continues to mourn the loss of one of its most respected session musicians. The official story, carefully crafted by Charlie Torino's network of connected individuals, paints a picture of a talented artist overwhelmed by the pressures of success and the easy availability of increasingly dangerous drugs. The heroin found in Banquo's system was pure enough to suggest a fatal miscalculation rather than deliberate self-destruction, though whispers in the underground scene speak of contaminated supplies and unscrupulous dealers targeting successful musicians. Mac stands in his 7th-floor office, staring down at Sunset Boulevard through windows that now feel more like prison bars than symbols of achievement. The Strip bustles with its usual energy. Musicians carrying instrument cases drift between recording studios, while industry executives in expensive suits negotiate deals over 3 martini lunches. But the vibrant tableau below seems drained of color, as if Mac's guilt has installed a gray filter over his perception of the world he once found so intoxicating. The memorial service had been held at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery, where Banquo's grave now sits among the elaborate headstones of movie stars and music legends. Mac had delivered a eulogy that praised his friend's dedication to the craft and lamented the tragic waste of artistic potential, his words flowing with the practiced sincerity of someone who's learned to perform grief while feeling only the cold satisfaction of eliminated threats. But the satisfaction has curdled into something else entirely. Sleep comes only with the assistance of barbiturates that leave him groggy and disoriented during morning meetings. His appetite has vanished, replaced by a constant nausea that no amount of antacids can settle. Most disturbing of all are the hallucinations, glimpses of Banquo's face and reflective surfaces, the sound of his bass lines bleeding through the walls from empty recording studios, phantom phone calls where his voice whispers accusations through static-filled connections. Groovy enters the office without knocking, her presence announced by the gentle chiming of the bells woven into her flowing auburn hair. She's adopted an even more ethereal style since Banquo's death, as if channeling otherworldly energies to compensate for the earthly guilt that threatens to consume them both. Today she wears a white dress that seems to float around her like morning mist, complemented by jewelry crafted from crystals and silver that catches the afternoon light filtering through the office windows. "The Weird Sisters are downstairs," she announces, settling into the leather chair positioned in front of Mac's massive oak desk. "They want to discuss some developments that might interest you." Mac's stomach clenches at the mention of the 3 music journalists whose prophecies seem to manifest with disturbing regularity. Their last encounter had correctly predicted his rise to power, and he's both eager and terrified to learn what their supernatural insight might reveal about his future trajectory. "What kind of developments?" he asks, though part of him already suspects the answer will involve Malcolm Duncan, whose absence from the industry has stretched from weeks into months without any official word about his condition or potential return. "Malcolm's been released from the facility in Big Sur," Groovy reports, her voice carrying the neutral tone she's learned to use when delivering potentially explosive information. According to their sources, he's not only recovered from his experience, but he's claiming to have achieved some kind of breakthrough in understanding the relationship between music and consciousness expansion. The news hits Mac like a physical blow. Malcolm's return threatens everything he's built during his tenure running the Psychedelic division. Worse, if Malcolm's memories of that night at Duncan's party have clarified during his recovery, he might possess dangerous knowledge about the circumstances that led to his elimination from the succession equation. Through the office's sound system, the Beatles' Strawberry Fields Forever plays at low volume, its dreamy orchestration creating an ironic soundtrack for conversations about paranoia and guilt. The song's lyrics about nothing being real take on sinister overtones in the context of Mac's carefully constructed version of recent events. "There's more," Groovy continues, her crystal jewelry catching the light as she leans forward conspiratorially. "The sisters mentioned that Malcolm's been asking questions about Banquo's death. Specifically, he's been wondering why someone with Banquo's experience would suddenly develop a heroin habit, especially such pure heroin that it suggests connections to suppliers who typically serve only the wealthiest clients. Mac feels the walls of his corner office beginning to close in around him like the sides of a shrinking recording booth. The panoramic view of Los Angeles that once represented infinite possibility now seems to mock his trapped condition. He can see freedom and success spread out below him, but he's increasingly unable to enjoy either without the constant fear of exposure and retribution. "What do the sisters suggest?" Mac asks, though he's beginning to suspect that their counsel will involve additional violence, more elaborate cover-ups, and deeper descent into the kind of moral quicksand that swallows souls one compromise at a time. They believe Malcolm represents an existential threat to everything we've accomplished. Groovy replies, her voice taking on the hypnotic rhythm that Mac has learned to associate with her most persuasive arguments. He has legitimate claim to the position you now hold. Family connections that override any demonstration of competence or vision, and potentially dangerous knowledge about events that should remain buried with Banquo. The office's ambient lighting seems to dim as clouds pass over the afternoon sun, creating shadows that dance across the walls covered with gold records and industry awards. Mac's achievements, so impressive just hours ago, now feel fragile and temporary, like sandcastles waiting for the inevitable tide of discovery and retribution. Charlie Torino's services aren't unlimited, Mac observes, his voice barely audible above the whisper of air conditioning that maintains the office's perfect climate control. Banquo was a session musician with a drug problem. Malcolm is Duncan King's son and heir. His death would trigger investigations that even Charlie's network might not be able to contain. Groovy's smile carries the dangerous beauty of broken glass catching sunlight. Who said anything about death? There are other ways to eliminate threats, more subtle approaches that leave no bodies for investigators to examine. The basement conference room at Cawdor Records has been transformed into something resembling a mystical cave more than a corporate meeting space. The Weird Sisters have arrived with an arsenal of props that blur the line between journalism and performance art. Tarot cards spread across the polished conference table, burning incense that creates aromatic clouds in the air-conditioned atmosphere, and a collection of crystals that seem to pulse with inner light under the room's track lighting. Stella Hecate sits at the head of the table like a high priestess presiding over a ritual, her silver hair catching the light from candles she's arranged in geometric patterns around her legal notepad. Her companions, Luna and Raven, flank her with the symmetrical precision of backup singers, supporting a lead vocalist. All three women wear flowing black clothing that seems to absorb light rather than reflect it, creating the impression that their shadows given form and voice. Mac enters the room feeling like a supplicant approaching an oracle, his usual executive confidence replaced by the nervous energy of someone seeking guidance from forces beyond normal understanding. The basement's acoustic properties make every sound seem both muffled and amplified, creating an otherworldly atmosphere where whispered conversations take on the weight of pronouncements from the beyond. Macbeth, Stella's voice carries its familiar otherworldly resonance. The wheel of fortune continues to turn, but its direction has become uncertain. Your rise to power was foretold, but maintaining that power requires navigation of increasingly treacherous waters. Luna spreads additional tarot cards across the table's surface, their colorful images creating a kaleidoscope of symbols and archetypes that seem to shift and dance in the flickering candlelight. The death card appears prominently, though Luna quickly explains that it represents transformation rather than literal mortality. Malcolm Duncan represents both your greatest opportunity and your most dangerous threat. She intones, her voice dreamy and distant, as if she's channeling information from dimensions beyond ordinary perception. His experience in Big Sur has left him changed. He's no longer the privileged heir who dismissed psychedelic culture as a passing fad. Raven leans forward, her dark eyes intense as she delivers the most crucial intelligence. Our sources at the facility report that Malcolm underwent a series of guided LSD sessions under medical supervision. Far from traumatizing him, the experiences have convinced him that consciousness expansion is the key to the future of human evolution. He's planning to return to Cawdor Records with a revolutionary vision that could eclipse everything you've accomplished. The news hits Mac like a discordant chord struck at maximum volume. Malcolm's conversion to the psychedelic cause eliminates Mac's primary advantage, his unique understanding of the counterculture market. Worse, Malcolm's combination of family connections, financial resources, and newfound passion for consciousness expansion could make him an unstoppable force in the industry's evolution. "What do you suggest?" Mac asks, his voice barely audible above the ambient sound of incense burners and the building's ventilation system humming through hidden speakers. Stella's smile carries the dangerous beauty of a knife blade catching moonlight. Malcolm's transformation is also his vulnerability. He's become a true believer, which means he can be manipulated through his beliefs rather than his fears. We propose an elegant solution that eliminates him as a threat while appearing to embrace his vision. The sisters explain their plan with the methodical precision of master strategists who've orchestrated similar campaigns throughout the industry's history. Malcolm will be invited to participate in a consciousness expansion experiment that pushes far beyond the relatively mild experiences that converted him to the psychedelic cause. The dosage will be massive, enough pure pharmaceutical LSD to send him on a journey from which his personality may never fully return. The beauty of the approach, Luna explains, her voice carrying the enthusiasm of an artist describing a masterpiece, is that Malcolm will volunteer eagerly. Will present it as the ultimate expression of his newfound commitment to consciousness exploration. He'll see it as an opportunity to achieve the kind of transcendent state that the most advanced practitioners only dream about. Raven adds the crucial technical details. The laboratory in Sausalito has developed compounds that make standard LSD seem like aspirin. Massive doses of pure psilocybin combined with experimental compounds that haven't even been named yet. The experience will be so intense that even if Malcolm survives physically, his consciousness will be permanently altered, scattered across dimensions where his memories of earthly concerns become irrelevant. Mac feels his hands trembling as he processes the implications of their proposal. They're describing a form of psychological assassination that would leave Malcolm's body intact while destroying his mind so thoroughly that he'd be incapable of threatening anyone ever again. The facility in Big Sur will provide the perfect cover, Stella continues, her voice taking on the hypnotic rhythm that Mac has learned to associate with irresistible logical progression. Malcolm's doctors are already recommending additional therapeutic sessions to consolidate his breakthrough insights. One more experiment, one final push toward total ego dissolution, and your problems disappear into the cosmic void, along with what remains of Malcolm's individual consciousness. Through the conference room's small windows that look out at street level, Mac can see the boots and flowing dresses of pedestrians walking along Sunset Boulevard. The normal world continues its mundane business, while he sits in this underground chamber contemplating acts that would have been unthinkable just months ago, when his greatest concern was landing enough session work to pay rent. "There's something else," Groovy interjects, her voice cutting through the incense-laden air like a silver blade. "The hallucinations you've been experiencing, Banquo's voice, his face in mirrors, the sound of his bass bleeding through the walls. They're going to get worse unless we eliminate their source." Mac looks at her in confusion. "What source? Banquo is dead." "His son," Stella explains matter-of-factly, consulting her notes with professional detachment. "Fleance is 18 now, a bassist like his father, and he's been asking questions about the circumstances surrounding Banquo's death. He's got his father's intuitive intelligence and his mother's determination to uncover the truth. If he starts connecting the dots between your promotion, his father's suspicions, and the convenient timing of everything." The conference room feels like it's shrinking around Mac, as he realizes the full scope of what his ambition has set in motion. The elimination of one threat has created new threats, and each solution generates additional problems that demand increasingly extreme responses. "Fleance will be at the consciousness expansion session," Raven announces, her voice carrying the finality of a judge pronouncing sentence. Malcolm specifically requested that promising young musicians be invited to witness his ultimate breakthrough. The boy will be there when his benefactor transcends individual existence, and if he asks too many questions about his father's death. The implication hangs in the air like toxic smoke from a chemical fire. Mac understands that he's crossed a threshold from which there may be no return, entering a realm where friendship, loyalty, and human life itself become acceptable casualties in the pursuit of power and security. The consciousness expansion session is scheduled for a secluded compound in the hills above Big Sur, where the Pacific Ocean stretches toward the horizon like an endless mirror reflecting the last light of the California sun. The facility, officially known as the Esalen Institute, has become a pilgrimage destination for seekers exploring the intersection of psychology, spirituality, and pharmaceutical consciousness expansion. Its rustic buildings blend seamlessly with the natural landscape, creating an atmosphere where the boundaries between civilization and wilderness dissolve as completely as the ego boundaries of the participants in its experimental programs. Mac arrives at the compound driving a rented Volkswagen van painted with swirling psychedelic patterns, its interior filled with recording equipment that will supposedly document Malcolm's ultimate breakthrough for posterity. The cover story positions Mac as a sympathetic ally, eager to help Malcolm share his consciousness expansion insights with the broader music industry, though the sophisticated audio gear conceals surveillance devices that will provide evidence of the session's tragic outcome. The main lodge rises from a grove of redwood trees like a temple dedicated to the religion of human potential. Its architecture deliberately echoes both Native American longhouses and Japanese meditation halls, creating a space that feels simultaneously ancient and futuristic. Large windows offer panoramic views of the coastline below, where waves crash against granite cliffs in an eternal rhythm that seems to synchronize with the elevated heartbeats of the dozen participants gathered for the evening's experiment. Malcolm appears transformed by his months of therapeutic exploration. Gone is the conservative suit and carefully styled hair of Duncan King's corporate heir. In their place stands a figure who could have stepped from the pages of a Counterculture magazine. Flowing white linen shirt, dark hair grown past his shoulders, eyes that hold the intense luminosity of someone who has stared directly into the mysteries of existence and emerged convinced of his own cosmic significance. Mac. Malcolm's greeting carries none of the condescension that once marked their interactions. "I'm so grateful you could witness this. What we're about to experience tonight will revolutionize not just music, but human consciousness itself." His voice vibrates with evangelical fervor, the passion of a convert, eager to share his revelation with anyone willing to listen. Among the other participants, Mac spots Fleance immediately. The young man possesses his father's intuitive intelligence, reflected in dark eyes that seem to process multiple layers of reality simultaneously. At 18, he's already developed the muscular forearms and sensitive fingers of a serious bassist, though his inheritance includes more than musical talent. Banquo's son carries himself with the same quiet watchfulness that made his father such an effective judge of character and situations. The session leader, Dr. Timothy Leary himself, commands attention through sheer force of personality and reputation. His presence transforms the rustic lodge into a laboratory, where the future of human consciousness is being researched, one pharmaceutical revelation at a time. Wearing simple white clothing that seems to glow in the soft lighting, he moves through the space like a high priest preparing for the most sacred of rituals. Tonight, we journey beyond the individual self into the collective unconscious that connects all sentient beings. Leary announces, his voice carrying the authority of someone who has guided thousands through similar explorations. The substances we'll be working with represent the purest expressions of consciousness-expanding chemistry, doses calibrated to dissolve the barriers between self and cosmos completely. Mac feels his pulse accelerate as he watches the preparation ritual unfold. Small paper squares soaked in liquid LSD are distributed to participants, but Malcolm receives a special dose. Clear liquid in a small glass vial that contains enough pharmaceutical-grade psychedelics to launch a dozen people into orbit around their own dissolving egos. The Weird Sisters connections have ensured that Malcolm's ultimate experience will indeed be his last coherent interaction with consensus reality. The lodge's lighting dims to create an atmosphere conducive to inner exploration. Candles positioned throughout the space cast dancing shadows on walls decorated with mandalas, Tibetan prayer flags, and photographs of spiritual masters from various traditions. The visual environment has been carefully designed to guide consciousness toward transcendent rather than terrifying experiences, though Mac knows that no amount of set and setting can contain the psychological tsunami about to engulf Malcolm's awareness. To new dimensions of understanding, Malcolm raises his vial in a toast, his eyes shining with anticipation. Around the circle, other participants lift their own doses in solidarity, though none suspect they're witnessing what amounts to a pharmaceutical execution disguised as spiritual exploration. Mac pretends to consume his own dose while palming the actual square of LSD-soaked paper, a sleight of hand perfected during weeks of practice. He must remain lucid to document the session's outcome and manage any complications that might arise when Malcolm's consciousness departs for regions from which it will never return. The lodge fills with the ethereal sounds of Indian classical music, tablas and sitars, creating rhythmic patterns that seem designed to guide awareness away from earthly concerns and toward cosmic dissolution. As the substances begin their work, conversations become more abstract, gestures more fluid, and the artificial boundaries between individual participants start to soften like ice cream melting in California sunshine. Fleant sits cross-legged near one of the large windows, his young face reflecting the interplay of candlelight and moonlight as he begins his own journey into expanded consciousness. Mac watches him with growing anxiety, knowing that the young man's fate depends on how much he remembers about his father's suspicions and how clearly he can articulate those memories when the session ends. Malcolm's transformation accelerates beyond anything Mac had anticipated. Within 30 minutes, Duncan King's heir is completely absorbed in visions that play across his dilated pupils, like movies projected on internal screens. His body remains present in the lodge, but his consciousness has departed for dimensions where corporate succession plans and industry politics cease to have any meaning. "I can see the mathematical structures underlying all music," Malcolm whispers, his voice filled with wonder and terror in equal measure. "Every note is connected to every other note in patterns that span galaxies. The record business is just an illusion, a game played by sleeping people who don't understand that consciousness itself is the only real currency." The recording equipment captures every word, documenting Malcolm's descent into a pharmaceutical-induced madness that will render him permanently unfit for corporate responsibility. Mac feels a mixture of satisfaction and horror as he watches his rival disappear into a labyrinth of consciousness from which there will be no return to the mundane world of gold records and board meetings. But as the night deepens and the session reaches its peak intensity, Mac realizes that eliminating Malcolm may not be enough to secure his position. The industry is full of ambitious people who understand that power vacuums create opportunities, and Duncan King's grief over his son's condition will eventually give way to the practical necessity of naming a permanent successor to the Cawdor Records empire. 6 months after Malcolm's pharmaceutical exile to the outer reaches of consciousness, Macbeth's empire has begun to crumble like a sandcastle, caught in the rising tide of paranoia and industry politics. The Psychedelic division, once the crown jewel of Cawdor Records, now operates under a cloud of suspicion and declining profits, as the counterculture movement itself fragments into competing factions and increasingly dangerous extremes. Mac sits in his corner office as dawn breaks over the Sunset Strip, but the panoramic view that once symbolized limitless possibility now feels like a prison window looking out on a world that has turned hostile and unforgiving. His appearance reflects months of sleepless nights and pharmaceutical assistance. His face gaunt and pale, his dark hair now streaked with premature silver, his once fashionable clothing hanging loose on a frame diminished by stress and guilt. The morning's trade publications spread across his desk tell a story of systematic collapse disguised as market correction. Rolling Stone magazine features a cover story questioning the ethics of record label executives who profit from the drug culture while musicians die from overdoses and psychological breakdowns. Variety reports declining sales for psychedelic albums as radio stations shift towards safer, more commercial sounds. Most damaging of all, the underground press has begun investigating connections between recent industry deaths and the rapid consolidation of power within major labels. Through the office's sound system, The Doors' The End plays at low volume, its dark poetry and haunting organ lines creating a soundtrack that perfectly captures Mac's deteriorating psychological state. The song's themes of patricide and apocalyptic transformation seem to speak directly to his situation, where the elimination of father figures has created not liberation but an endless spiral of necessary violence. Duncan King enters without knocking, his presence announced only by the soft click of the door closing behind him. The legendary label owner has aged dramatically since Malcolm's breakdown, his silver hair now completely white, his once commanding presence diminished by grief and suspicion. He moves through the office like a ghost, haunting the scene of his own corporate empire's dissolution. "We need to talk." Duncan's voice carries none of its former authority, replaced by the hollow tone of someone who has lost everything that mattered to him. "The board met in emergency session last night. There are questions being asked, Mac. Questions about timing, about coincidences, about the convenient way obstacles to your advancement have been removed. Mac feels his heart hammering against his ribs like a caged bird desperate for escape. The moment he's dreaded for months has finally arrived, the reckoning that transforms success into tragedy and ambition into destruction. What kind of questions? Mac's voice comes out as barely a whisper, though he already knows the answer will involve Banquo's death, Malcolm's condition, and the mathematical improbability of so much good fortune befalling one person in such a short time frame. Duncan moves to the window, his silhouette framed against the morning light like a figure in a film noir thriller. Harrison Fletcher hired private investigators to look into Banquo's death. They found discrepancies in the toxicology reports, financial transactions that suggest the heroin was purchased by someone with access to industry accounts, surveillance footage from the Rainbow Bar showing him in conversation with Charlie Torino 3 days before his body was found. The walls of the office seem to contract around Mac as he realizes that his carefully constructed version of events is unraveling thread by thread. The private investigators have followed a trail of evidence that leads directly to his door, and even Charlie Torino's legendary discretion may not be enough to protect him from the consequences of his choices. Moreover, Duncan continues, his voice gaining strength as anger begins to replace grief. Malcolm's doctors at the facility have been asking questions about the session where he suffered his setback. They found traces of compounds in his system that weren't part of the standard therapeutic protocol. Someone administered massive doses of experimental substances without medical supervision. Through the office door's frosted glass, Mac can see movement in the hallway. Security guards taking positions. Board members, gathering for what appears to be a confrontation that will determine not just his professional future but his personal liberty. The empire he built through deception and murder is about to collapse with the same sudden violence that brought it into existence. Groovy appears in the doorway, like a vision from a fever dream, her flowing white dress and ethereal appearance creating an otherworldly contrast to the corporate environment that no longer provides sanctuary from the consequences of their actions. Her presence both comforts and terrifies Mac, representing as she does both his deepest love and his most dangerous influence toward moral compromise. "The investigators are downstairs," she announces, her voice maintaining its dreamy quality, even as she delivers news that will shatter their carefully constructed reality. "They have warrants for both our arrests. Charlie Torino has been taken into custody, and he's apparently decided that cooperation with federal authorities represents his best chance for avoiding life imprisonment." The words hit Mac like physical blows, each revelation another nail in the coffin of his ambitions. Charlie's betrayal means that the network of connected individuals who facilitated Banquo's elimination and Malcolm's psychological destruction will be exposed, creating a paper trail that leads directly to the Cawdor Records Psychedelic division and its ambitious young director. Duncan turns from the window, his expression revealing the transformation from grief-stricken father to cold-blooded businessman determined to salvage what remains of his corporate empire. "You have 5 minutes to clear out your personal effects before security escorts you from the building. Your contracts are void, your access cards are deactivated, and your name is being removed from every project you've worked on." The intercom system crackles to life with the voice of Mac's assistant, Rainbow, though her usual dreamy tone has been replaced by something approaching panic. "Mac, there are federal agents in the lobby asking questions about Banquo's death and Malcolm's condition. They want to examine your office and review all communication records from the past year." Mac looks around the space that represented his ascension to power, the guitars that once symbolized artistic achievement, the gold records that documented commercial success, the panoramic view that promised infinite possibility. All of it has been transformed from treasure into evidence, from symbols of accomplishment into markers of corruption and murder. The sound of footsteps in the hallway grows louder, accompanied by the crackle of police radios and the authoritative voices of law enforcement officers prepared to bring the full weight of federal justice to bear on the music industry's most spectacular fall from grace. Groovy moves to Mac's side, her hand finding his as they face the approaching end of their shared dreams and individual freedom. "We could run," she whispers, her voice carrying the desperate hope of someone clinging to possibilities that no longer exist. "Mexico, Europe, somewhere they can't reach us." But Mac knows that running will only postpone the inevitable. The evidence Charlie Torino has provided will follow them anywhere in the world, and the music industry's global connections ensure that there are no hiding places for someone who has betrayed the fundamental trust that binds the community together. The federal agents move through the Cawdor Records building, like antibodies attacking an infection. Their conservative suits and methodical efficiency creating a stark contrast to the psychedelic artwork and creative chaos that normally defines the label's atmosphere. Special Agent Sarah Macduff leads the investigation team with the focused intensity of someone who has spent months building an airtight case against targets who thought themselves untouchable. Mac watches from his office window as musicians and staff members are escorted from the building, their guitar cases and demo tapes confiscated as potential evidence in a federal investigation that threatens to expose the shadow network connecting record labels, organized crime, and pharmaceutical-assisted elimination of inconvenient individuals. The scene below resembles a military operation more than a law enforcement action, suggesting that Mac's crimes have attracted attention from agencies beyond local police jurisdiction. Special Agent Macduff is here to see you. Rainbow's voice crackles through the intercom system, but her usual dreamy tone has been replaced by barely controlled terror. The young woman's flower power optimism has been shattered by the realization that her workplace was actually the headquarters of a criminal enterprise, disguised as artistic revolution. Agent Macduff enters the office with the confident stride of someone holding all the winning cards in a game where the stakes include life imprisonment and federal conspiracy charges. She's younger than Mac expected, perhaps 35, but her eyes hold the hardened intelligence of someone who has investigated cases that most people can only imagine in their worst nightmares. Mr. Beth. Her voice carries the neutral professionalism of federal law enforcement. I'm here to discuss your relationship with Charles Torino, the circumstances surrounding Banquo Williams' death, and the events that led to Malcolm Duncan's psychological breakdown at the Esalen Institute. Mac feels reality fracturing around him, like a record played at the wrong speed, the familiar melodies of his life becoming discordant noise that no longer makes coherent sense. The carefully constructed narrative he's maintained for months dissolves under the weight of evidence that Charlie Torino has apparently provided in exchange for reduced sentences and federal witness protection. I don't know what Charlie might have told you. Mac manages, his voice sounding strange and distant in his own ears. But he's a known criminal, with every reason to fabricate stories that might reduce his own legal exposure. Agent Macduff consults a leather portfolio filled with documents that represent months of investigative work by teams of federal agents, forensic accountants, and pharmaceutical experts. Mr. Torino has provided extensive documentation of his relationship with your wife, including recorded conversations where she requested specific services related to eliminating threats to your professional advancement. The words hit Mac like a physical assault, each revelation another demonstration of how completely his world has unraveled. Groovy's betrayal. For recording such conversations surely constitutes betrayal, even if unintentional. Adds personal devastation to the professional and legal catastrophe, engulfing his remaining hopes for escape. Moreover, Agent Macduff continues, her voice maintaining its professional detachment. We have financial records showing payments from accounts associated with the Cawdor Records Psychedelic division to companies controlled by Mr. Torino's network. The timing of these payments corresponds precisely with Banquo Williams' death and Malcolm Duncan's pharmaceutical overdose. Through the office's sound system, Jimi Hendrix's Purple Haze plays at low volume. It's psychedelic guitar work, creating an ironic soundtrack for conversations about the criminal exploitation of the consciousness expansion movement. The song's themes of confusion and altered reality seem to mirror Mac's deteriorating grip on the distinction between his constructed version of events and the documented truth that federal investigators have assembled. Groovy enters the office uninvited, her ethereal presence now appearing desperate rather than mystical. Her white dress is wrinkled and stained, her usually perfect hair, disheveled from hours of federal questioning in rooms designed to break down psychological defenses through systematic pressure and relentless attention to contradictory details. They know everything, Mac, she whispers, her voice stripped of its usual dreamy quality and replaced by raw panic. They have photographs, bank records, testimony from people we thought we could trust. Charlie didn't just cooperate, he's been recording conversations for months, building evidence while pretending to help us eliminate obstacles. The revelation that Charlie Torino was working as an informant adds another layer of betrayal to Mac's expanding understanding of how completely he's been outmaneuvered. The fixer who seemed like their salvation was actually their destruction, documenting their crimes while facilitating them, creating evidence while appearing to help cover it up. Agent Macduff watches this exchange, with the satisfaction of someone whose investigative theories are being confirmed in real time. Mrs. Beth, you're also under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, tampering with controlled substances, and racketeering in connection with organized crime activities within the music industry. The charges read like a catalog of Mac's moral descent, from ambitious session musician to criminal mastermind, willing to murder friends and destroy rivals in pursuit of power and security. Each count represents a specific choice he made to cross ethical boundaries that once seemed absolute and inviolable. You have the right to remain silent. Agent Macduff continues with practiced efficiency, though I should mention that Mr. Sevendation Torino's cooperation has provided us with sufficient evidence to pursue maximum sentences, regardless of whether you choose to assist in our investigation of broader criminal networks within the industry. Mac feels handcuffs closing around his wrists with the finality of a recording session's last take. No opportunity for revision, no chance to try a different approach, no possibility of achieving a better outcome through additional effort or alternative strategies. The cold metal against his skin represents the transformation from creative artist to federal prisoner, from industry insider to criminal defendant. As they're escorted through the Cawdor Records building toward waiting federal vehicles, Mac sees the faces of musicians and staff members who once looked at him with respect and admiration. Those expressions have been replaced by horror, disappointment, and the kind of betrayal that people feel when discovering that someone they trusted has been capable of unimaginable crimes. The elevator descends through floors that once represented his ascension to power, each level marking another stage in his descent, from artistic success to criminal notoriety. The building's Art Deco architecture, so inspiring during his rise, now feels like the interior of a mausoleum designed to house the corpse of his destroyed ambitions. In the lobby, reporters and photographers have gathered to document the federal arrest of one of the music industry's most meteoric success stories. Camera flashes explode like strobes at a rock concert, but instead of celebrating artistic achievement, they're recording the spectacular collapse of a career built on deception, murder, and the systematic elimination of anyone who threatened Mac's carefully constructed version of reality. Duncan King stands near the building's entrance, his white hair catching the harsh light from television cameras, as reporters ask questions about his son's condition and the criminal activities that apparently flourished within his corporate empire. His expression reveals the devastation of someone who has lost not just his heir and successor, but his faith in his own judgment about people and their capacity for evil. The federal courthouse in downtown Los Angeles rises from the urban landscape like a monument to justice delayed but not denied, its neoclassical columns and granite facade, creating an atmosphere of institutional authority that dwarfs the individual ambitions of those brought before its judicial proceedings. The building's steps have become a gathering place for reporters, photographers, and curious onlookers, drawn to witness the spectacular conclusion of what the press has dubbed the psychedelic conspiracy. Macbeth sits in the defendant's chair wearing an orange jumpsuit that transforms him from industry executive to federal prisoner, the bright color creating a grotesque parody of the psychedelic fashion that once represented his connection to counterculture revolution. 6 months of pre-trial detention have completed the physical transformation that began with guilt and paranoia, his face gaunt and hollow-eyed, his once lustrous dark hair now completely gray, his hands trembling from withdrawal from the various pharmaceutical substances that helped him cope with the psychological aftermath of his crimes. The prosecution's case unfolds with the methodical precision of a classical music composition, each piece of evidence building upon the previous revelation to create an overwhelming symphony of documented guilt. Charlie Torino's testimony, delivered from behind bulletproof glass due to credible threats from other industry figures he's implicated, provides a detailed catalog of services provided to eliminate obstacles to Mac's professional advancement. The defendant and his wife approached me in March 1967. Charlie's voice carries through the courtroom's sound system with the flat affect of someone who has traded his soul for a reduced sentence. They wanted Banquo Williams eliminated because he was asking questions about Malcolm Duncan's pharmaceutical overdose. The fee was $50,000, paid through shell companies connected to the Cawdor Records Psychedelic division. The financial records displayed on courtroom monitors tell their own story of systematic corruption disguised as artistic patronage. Bank transfers, dummy corporations, and cash payments create a paper trail that documents not just Mac's specific crimes, but the broader network of criminal activity that has infected the music industry like a cancer metastasizing through its creative organs. Agent Macduff takes the stand with the confident bearing of someone whose investigative work has revealed crimes that exceed even federal prosecutors' initial estimates of the case's scope. Her testimony transforms months of surveillance, financial analysis, and forensic investigation into a narrative that reads like a thriller novel, where the villain's ambitions ultimately destroy everything they sought to protect. The defendant's network eliminated at least 7 individuals who posed threats to his advancement within the industry. She testifies, consulting notes that represent thousands of hours of investigative work. Beyond Banquo Williams and the pharmaceutical assault on Malcolm Duncan, we've documented connections to the deaths of 3 music journalists, a competing record executive, and 2 musicians whose testimonies could have exposed the conspiracy. Mac listens to the catalog of his crimes with the detached fascination of someone watching a film about another person's life. The psychological dissociation that began with Banquo's murder has reached its logical conclusion. He no longer feels connected to the ambitious session musician who made the first fateful choice to cross ethical boundaries in pursuit of professional success. The courtroom gallery includes faces from throughout Mac's career trajectory: Duncan King, aged and broken by his son's condition and the revelation of criminal activity within his corporate empire; Fleense Williams, now 21, and bearing his father's intuitive intelligence alongside burning hatred for the man who destroyed his family; Rainbow, his former assistant, whose flower power optimism has been permanently shattered by exposure to the evil that flourished beneath her workplace's psychedelic facade. Most devastating of all is Groovy's absence. Mac's wife and co-conspirator took her own life 3 weeks into their pre-trial detention, unable to bear the psychological weight of their crimes and the certainty of spending the remainder of her life in federal prison. The method she chose, an overdose of the same pure LSD they had used to destroy Malcolm Duncan, carried its own poetic justice, transforming the consciousness expansion she had perverted into criminal purposes into a final escape from unbearable reality. The prosecution's closing argument transforms the courtroom into a theater where the full scope of Mac's moral dissent is displayed for public judgment. The ambitious session musician who wanted only to serve the music had become a monster who destroyed everything he touched in pursuit of power that ultimately proved as illusory as the hallucinations that tormented his guilt-racked consciousness. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the federal prosecutor's voice carries through the courtroom like a final chord resolving a complex musical composition. You have heard testimony about crimes that represent not just individual moral failure, but a systematic corruption of an industry that shapes how young people understand themselves and their place in the world. The jury deliberation lasts less than 2 hours, insufficient time to review even a fraction of the evidence presented, but more than adequate to reach unanimous agreement about Mac's guilt on all federal charges. The forewoman's voice, reading the verdicts, creates a rhythm like a funeral dirge. Guilty on 17 counts of conspiracy to commit murder. Guilty on 12 counts of racketeering. Guilty on 23 counts of using interstate commerce to facilitate criminal enterprise. Judge Harrison delivers the sentence with the measured cadence of someone who has presided over cases that reveal the darkest aspects of human nature, but still retains faith in the judicial system's capacity to provide appropriate consequences. Mr. Beth, your crimes represent a betrayal not just of specific individuals, but of the artistic community that trusted you with positions of influence and creative authority. Life imprisonment, without possibility of parole. The words echo through the courthouse with the finality of a recording session's fade-out, marking the end of Macbeth's story and his complete removal from the world he sought to control through violence and deception. As federal marshals escort him from the courtroom toward a prison transport vehicle, Mac catches sight of Duncan King standing near the courthouse entrance. The label owner who once saw promise in an ambitious session musician now watches his protégé's final exit from public life with an expression that combines grief, disappointment, and the kind of profound exhaustion that comes from witnessing the complete corruption of someone who once represented hope and creative possibility. The transport vehicle's windows are tinted black, preventing Mac from seeing the city that once promised unlimited opportunity to anyone with sufficient talent and ambition. Los Angeles disappears behind bulletproof glass and steel mesh, taking with it the dreams, relationships, and artistic achievements that he sacrificed in pursuit of power that proved as temporary as a top 40 hit single. The federal penitentiary in Leavenworth, Kansas, represents the final destination of Mac's journey from creative collaboration to criminal isolation. His cell is 8 feet by 10 feet, furnished with a metal cot, a small desk, and a toilet that serves as constant reminder of how far he has fallen from corner offices with panoramic views of the Sunset Strip. In the prison's common areas, other inmates recognize him from news coverage of his trial, their expressions mixing curiosity with the predatory calculation of people who understand that former celebrities make valuable targets for various forms of exploitation and violence. The respect he once commanded through artistic achievement and industry connections has been replaced by the vulnerability that marks all fallen public figures in institutions designed to strip away everything that once distinguished them from common criminals. The years pass in a rhythm as monotonous as a drum machine, punctuated only by occasional visits from journalists researching retrospective articles about the music industry's darkest period and the systematic corruption that flourished during the late 1960 seconds. Mac declines most interview requests, having nothing to add to stories about crimes that destroyed not just his own life, but the lives of everyone he claimed to love. Malcolm Duncan never fully recovered from his pharmaceutical overdose at the Esalen Institute. He remains in a private care facility where his days are spent creating abstract paintings that suggest consciousness permanently altered by his journey into dimensions from which individual personality never completely returns. His artwork sells for substantial sums to collectors, fascinated by the intersection of psychedelic experience and artistic expression, though Malcolm himself shows no interest in the commercial success of his altered state creativity. Duncan King sold Cawdor Records to a major label conglomerate and retreated to a house in the California mountains, where he spends his remaining years writing memoirs that attempt to make sense of how criminal conspiracy flourished within an industry dedicated to artistic expression and cultural transformation. His book, published posthumously, becomes a classic study of how personal ambition can corrupt even the most idealistic movements when individual ethics fail to match collective aspirations. Fleance Williams builds a successful career as a bass player and producer, though he never fully escapes the shadow cast by his father's murder. His music carries undertones of loss and betrayal that resonate with audiences who understand that artistic expression often emerges from the darkest experiences of human existence. Macbeth dies in federal custody at age 53, his heart stopping during the night shift when prison guards are least attentive to inmates whose celebrity has faded into historical footnote. The death certificate lists cardiac arrest as the cause, though those who knew him understand that he died years earlier when guilt and paranoia finally overwhelmed his capacity to maintain the psychological defenses necessary for survival in a world where every relationship had been poisoned by his crimes. The obituaries in music industry publications are brief and factual, noting his early promise as a session musician and his spectacular fall from grace as head of Cawdor Records' Psychedelic division. None mention the artistic visions he once possessed, the musicians he once inspired, or the cultural revolution he might have shepherded if ambition had not transformed creativity into criminality. In the end, Macbeth's story becomes a cautionary tale told in music industry circles about the price of sacrificing friendship, loyalty, and basic human decency in pursuit of power and success. His name appears in academic studies of organizational corruption and criminal conspiracy, but disappears entirely from histories of the psychedelic movement and the artistic achievements that defined popular music's transformation during the 1960 seconds. The music itself survives, as music always does, finding new interpreters and fresh audiences who discover beauty and meaning in sounds created during an era when consciousness expansion promised to revolutionize human understanding of reality and possibility. But Macbeth's contribution to that revolution is remembered only as a warning about what happens when individual ambition becomes more important than collective creativity, when personal advancement matters more than artistic integrity, and when the pursuit of power destroys everything that made power worth pursuing in the first place.